Hi, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About Skills, baby. I am your host, Kelly Ryan Bailey. Each week, I chat with inspiring visionaries about the skills that make them successful, how they developed those skills, and their innovative approaches to improving skills-based hiring and learning around the world. Come learn what skills help you live your best life. This week, I'm joined by Sharon Leu. Sharon, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
Really
for
excited
having me.
to have you on.
Yeah.
And it looks so much sunnier there than it is right here right now. So I'm a little jealous.
Well, the sun comes with like 90 to 100 degrees of weather, so I don't know if it just ends up balancing out.
True. And it is a hot summer. Well, you guys, let me do a little introduction for Sharon. Sharon is the Senior Policy Advisor of the Higher Education Innovation at the U.S. Department of Education. She leads the Office of Educational Technology's post-secondary education innovation initiatives that explore the complex ecosystem of lifelong, life-wide post-secondary learning and the opportunities technology provides to broaden across to education for all learners. Most recently, these initiatives focus on open education, credential interoperability, and the Education Blockchains Initiative. Sharon also works in offices across the government on projects that showcase promising practices in digital workforce development and building capacity for emerging technologies. Prior to joining OET, Sharon oversaw the design and implementation of the Department of Labor's $2 billion, I say TACT grant program, but for those of you that are not familiar, it's Trade Adjustment Assistance, Community College, and Career Training. And I don't actually think I ever even knew what that acronym fully stood for, by the way.
No, it's better that way.
But it was the largest federal investment in post-secondary innovation and systematic infrastructure change. From what I understand, you have been working in government for, is it over 10 years now, right, Sharon?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a bureaucrat.
I was going to say, that's pretty unusual, right?
Yes.
Amazing. Well, and Sharon also is an aspiring park ranger. For all of you that don't even know what she's wearing on her shirt right now, please explain, Sharon, because we just talked about this.
Well, I wanted to wear, thanks for letting me wear this. This is my Junior Ranger badge. This is from 2016 when they were having their 100-year anniversary. And so if anyone has kids, so I do not have kids, but the Junior Ranger program is one of the best educational programs that the National Park Service runs. And essentially they have booklets at all of the national parks. And what you do is you take the booklet from the ranger and you do all the activities. So you learn about nature and animals and preserving the ecosystem and the environment, native cultures. There's a lot of work that's involved. And then you have to like swear a little oath to protect nature.
Oh, wow.
And they let you wear the hat for a photo and they give you this little badge, right? And so I love collecting these, and no one takes me seriously initially because they're actually looking for my kids when I ask for the Junior Ranger booklet. And then they always like impose extra rules. Like I think if you're like 0 to, or if you're like 3 to 5, you only have to do like 8 out of the 10 activities. They're always like, you have to do the whole book, right? And I'm like, fine, right. I'll do the whole book. And so I collect a lot of these. I have a spreadsheet. I don't know the exact number. I think I have about like 14 of them. That's probably more. But I actually, so this is like, I'm not going to mess up the internet connection here, but I have a spreadsheet where I tally all the parks I've been to with like all the ones where I have ranger badges and the date that I got them. So
that's amazing. And do you have a list of like the ones that are like next to go to?
Yes. I mean, obviously global pandemic has kind of messed up my plans for travel this year, but I really enjoy doing these activities. And I like to show people this because this is like one of my, I think this is one of the great sadnesses in my life, is that of all of the places that I have ever applied to jobs at, the National Park Service has rejected me the most times out of anybody. But I keep trying because I think it would be super fun to be a park ranger. And so whenever I go to a park, I ask park ranger, well, like, how did you get your job? Like, what is it that you do? How do I get your job? And it's really hard. And so I apply and I get rejected because on the list of like knowledge, skills, and abilities, I don't really have them. But like what I want someone to do, and this is a challenge to all the badge designers and like credentialing platforms, is
Yes.
I want you to help me show my skills, right? Because I do all
Yes.
these booklets. I know a lot about indigenous peoples and leaves and animals, but like none of that comes across to my LinkedIn profile because it all just shows things
No.
like she was an analyst and
Right.
she writes regulations. Like who needs that in a park? Like nobody. But like I have so many of these.
You're like,
So
I've done the whole booklet. Come on.
every time I do the whole booklet. So hopefully one of your listeners will like make me a way to like actually define my skills so that I can actually find my dream job.
Yes, and obviously something that we're working on. I mean, if the federal government can say that they're hiring based on skills, I feel like the parks can make that change too. And it just sounds super fun. I mean, I do have kids, and I'm thinking that, oh my gosh, my kids would love to do something like that, especially my oldest. So I'm just really glad to know about this. And I love, like, you're beaming. So this is like, it's so nice to hear this wonderful story. Well, and
You have a dog, because they have these for dogs too, by the way.
yeah. Yeah, we do have a dog, but our dog is not a super like social dog. It's more of a, I like my space and no other people and no dogs.
Okay.
So maybe better to take my kids.
Okay.
But Sharon, I mean, this is great because what I wanted to jump into first, which now we've learned a little bit about you, is sort of what led you into this work. And obviously there's this huge passion around determining like the skills that you've gained in all of these opportunities and how to portray those. So I feel like that's probably got to be some of it, but I'd love to hear more about your story, all of this time you've spent in the government space, but also in the space of sort of like building out your career.
So the thing is that the funny thing is that I work on a lot of projects that have the word career pathways in them, but honestly really dislike that term because I'm actually not a person that has a very linear career path. So whenever people like say things like, well, what do you want to be in 5 years? I'm like, I don't know, because like 5 years ago, would I have thought that I'm still here, or even 10 years ago? Probably not. So I started off, like I studied molecular genetics in school.
Nice.
And then I went on to study econ. And so not at all education policy or public administration or anything like that. But I was interested, but a lot of the work that I did focused on like cleaning data sets around like, you know, various different things. So when I was studying molecular biology, it was like genetics data. And then when I was in econ, it was like development indicators and things like that. And I needed a job. So I got a job doing data at the Department of Labor. So that is the way that I got into government, through like the USA Jobs website, which I know is like pretty weird, but like it actually works because I have a job.
That's amazing. That's really
so I had a number of
website's still around too.
It is still around, and people are working on it to, you know, try to improve the way that government does hiring. But it is a really hard process. I think everyone wants that to be better. There was an executive order recently too about how government should start thinking about skills-based hiring, which is also really encouraging. We just there's a lot of rules that we have to work around. Probably not more or less than what everyone else deals with about labor and fairness and competition and all of that. So it does tend to take a little bit of time. But my first job was involved data and looking at data and writing reports about it. And then, you know, in 2009, it was right around when there was recovery because there was also an economic disaster. And so a lot of the data sets that I worked on were around like the impact of trade on the US workforce and like things, you know, related to that, and eventually got into regulations that were around like the data. And then I realized that regulations are terrible because all you do is talk to lawyers all day, which, by the way, if you're listening and you're a lawyer, I don't implicitly dislike you. It's just a frustrating process that I realized I don't have the patience for. And so that's sort of a shift, right? To move from like being like behind the monitor and looking at numbers to like actually having to interact with humans, which I think was a skill that I didn't necessarily have very well. But you know, when they launched the TACT program, they were looking for someone who sort of understood the mechanics of why trade adjustment assistance, right? And so for those of you who don't know, trade adjustment assistance says like, as the economy shifts, right? So as as products are created, I guess, in foreign countries, or as skills are imported, or as things are imported, and the domestic workforce loses out, then the government should step in and help the workers whose jobs are lost find new training, right? So the TAA program, the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, is actually for the longest time was like the Cadillac of retraining programs, because not only did you get, if your job was trade impacted, right? So like if you worked for a company and they decided instead of manufacturing a particular part in the US, they would manufacture it overseas, then you could get benefits that included things like you could get the equivalent of unemployment insurance while you were in school, and while you were in that training program that the government paid for, you could also get additional benefits, and it included things like an extension of health and a number of other things. So I think it was like the grandfather of the most comprehensive package you could get.
Right.
But it was difficult because it was actually only for people whose jobs are impacted by trade.
Right.
So when they expanded it to this grant program, it was really interesting. They needed someone to like actually administer the program. And so that was how I like got into the world where I interact with humans and talk to people about how to develop programs, and started, I guess, the road. And then, because we worked with so many community colleges, I think by the end of it, over 60 or 70% of community colleges in the United States were my grantees at some point or the other. I think people thought I knew a little bit about education, and so I ended up at the Department of Ed.
I think you might have picked up a lot about education, and I'm still floored that you felt like you didn't have the people skills, because I'm like, knowing you today and how easy it is to talk to you, I'm like, I just can't imagine that.
Well, I had a really interesting conversation. This is a very pivotal conversation that I had in my life. It was probably the first time that I did anything that wasn't like a recorded webinar that was like, here are all the rules that you have to follow to be like a responsible grantee. It was like someone had invited my boss's boss to speak and to give a presentation and update at this meeting, and like nobody could, because she didn't go, and then like my supervisor, he couldn't go, and so I'm like sloppy thirds, right? And I'm like super nervous, so like I type out like what I'm gonna say. I'm only required to talk for 10 minutes. It's like an update. It has bullet points on all the data points of like how many grants, the dollars spent, like it's all the like details that I care about from my spreadsheets, right, that I had made.
Right.
And so, and then I was like, well, am I required to go to this networking happy hour? Like how many like minutes am I required to be at this place? And I actually even asked my boss at the time, I was like, well, can I have a small stack of your business cards? Because what's going to happen is people are going to want to like socialize and talk. And what I would love to do is give your business card out and say like, the person you should talk to is like my boss, who's like manages like all of this. And you should he's unable to be here today. You should get in touch with him at a later time. And I think he like said something to me like, you can't do that. And he said something that I still remember today. He was like, people like think the government is this like mysterious thing, right? They see the buildings,
right?
They're frustrated when they're at the DMV. And he was like, you should think about your role like in the public as being two things. Like you should be knowledgeable about the subject area that you're responsible for, and you should be approachable. And he's like, you're very knowledgeable. You're not approachable all the time. And I was like, oh, ouch. So, and he was like,
it always hurts when you first hear it, but it's like,
yes,
really, you've remembered it now, and it's like sage advice.
It is, because it wasn't like, he's like, these are not people that you're going to invite to your home for like your birthday party or anything. These are relationships that the department needs to have in order to be more effective at serving the public, right? So you have to engage the public, and you have to understand them and hear them, and they have to feel like they can come and talk to you. And I was like, oh, well, that's like really hard.
But then you got to flex your muscles on, practicing that. And it sounds like you just had to do that right away at that networking event.
Well, I cheated, right? So like I looked down the list of who's going to be there, and I like thought about like one thing that I feel like I could talk about with like all the people on the list. Like it wasn't like a huge list or anything like that. And so I think that like, this is an example of a skill I think that I didn't naturally have. And I sort of cheated like a lot of times. Like I love getting the who's coming to a conference thing because
Yes.
it lists,
Yeah.
because then I can say, like, I can mentally prepare myself. I can be like, oh, Kelly's going to be there. I'm going to ask her about, like, you know, what MZ is up to, because
Right.
you all just published a report. So I want to know about that. And I'll like write myself notes. And the first few times, like at that meeting, and then at probably like every meeting that year, I actually like brought a crib sheet with me. And I would say things like, if I would have met you that first year that I ever had to be in public, I would have been like, Kelly, you work for MZ. And then I would like look you up on my list, and I would be like, oh, Kelly, I read this report and here's my question for you. And it was so awkward and unnatural. But anyway,
No, I
we
mean,
power through.
it's a fantastic way. I actually really love that you're sharing this, because for people that just think, I mean, especially when anyone looks at maybe even sort of the platforms that we're on now, right? And they might come and see something that we speak at, and they're like, oh, wow. Well, I'm going to share my thing too, Sharon. Like, I was the shyest child you would ever meet. Like, up until I went to college, if I had to speak in front of an audience, in front of my classroom, that was my only experience at the time, I would turn bright red from like here to here, my full body. And I mean like really, really red. And I would stammer and I would have a really hard time. So the funny thing is that I very much like you did the exact same thing. So, and I still do to this day. I'm sitting here with a piece of paper, and I'm not reading from this, but it's like my prep. So I would prep like whatever it was that I wanted in my, whatever it was that I wanted in my head, I would just put out there. It doesn't come out of my mouth all the same, but that's how and even in some of those early ones where I'd be up on a podium in front of it, I'd be like holding on to the podium like, oh, but I had my notes, and it's okay. If anyone's seen me on stage now, they'll still notice I typically have a notebook or a piece of paper with me at all times. It's just like almost like a safety blanket. But I did the same thing with the lists of people, and I would have like my little things. I would look them up ahead of time because I was so nervous, like deathly nervous. So this is great to share with everyone that now sees us as we are. You know, if you're one of those people that is shy or feeling like you can't put yourself out there, that is actually a learned skill. You can learn it.
Yes.
So sorry to interrupt your story, but
no, that's
great. So you're involved
where we are.
Yeah, you're involved with tax. Like that's where you left us off. Obviously, people were like, now you know stuff about education. So that's what led you to the Department of Ed? Is that the next transition that you made in your sort of
and I'll say
career path?
something like, so I'll say one other thing about learning about education, which is a little embarrassing, and is that like, or not embarrassing, this is like the other part of the like have a list and a spreadsheet, is like ask people questions, because like there are so many people that I interact with right now. And I say this to her all the time, so I'm going to totally call her out. So like Casey Sachs is our Deputy Assistant Secretary of Community Colleges right now. She was a grantee when she was at the Colorado Community College System. She was my first round grantee, and I asked her and a lot of her colleagues in that first round of like TAC. So if you're like a TAC 1 grantee, thank you. Like I asked them a lot of really ridiculous questions. Like I would look at, so I'm like very like, my default is like, what does the spreadsheet say about, like, what do the numbers show on the spreadsheet? And I would look, and it would be like enrolled 0 students in the first quarter, right, of the first year, and then the note would be like, didn't receive state authorization or haven't been accredited for this program. And I would be like, why not? What can we do to fix this, right? And then I would call them up and I would be like, I don't understand why you're not accredited yet, or I don't understand why you need state authorization for this. And then I think that like, maybe like because we were on the telephone and not on Zoom, they would silently roll their eyes, but then someone would be like, here, read this. This is like how accreditation works in the United States. And I would say like, wow, that's like super complicated.
Right?
And it takes time. So yeah, I guess it's okay that your numbers are low if that hasn't happened.
Right.
So anyway, it was like really important context. And I felt like I learned a lot from just people who were very patient with me and explained it to me.
Yeah. But I think it's a really good point, because even like especially when you're not sure, you know, what necessarily to approach a person with, asking questions about them. Like I was actually talking with one of my colleagues about this the other day, who's a little younger, you know, and still unsure of how to build a network. And I was like, his idea was he wanted to cold reach out to someone because he'd read their article. And he was, and he found something interesting in the article. And I was like, do you know how excited someone would be to hear that someone, number one, read
it?
And then they actually like found it helpful and insightful and had thoughts. I was like, it's a home run.
Yes.
Like, go do it. People love to be asked questions about themselves. So it's a really good point that you stopped on there.
No, it's great. And I encourage like interns that work for me and fellows and all of that. Like, if you read something that you like, you should stalk the person like relentlessly, because I think that's a great way to just also keep in touch with like a field that you're interested in.
Exactly. No, I love that. I mean, this is why I laugh when I hear these things, because I don't mean to be, like, I'm just laughing because number one, I have a lot of similarities in the way I am too, but I'm like, to know you now today and to think that it's just amazing.
So I got to Ed because I was part of, one of those like programs that they have, like career development programs. And I needed to do some time. I called it like doing time. It's unfortunate. It was a detail outside of the agency to get exposure. And I was running out of time. And so I just contacted my friends at Ed and I said, the Department of Labor will continue to pay me. So can I just sit like in your space for a little while? So the person I stalked at the time was like Richard Collada, who's the director of the Office of Ed Tech. And so I said, just like, let me come hang out. I know that you don't do like a lot of higher ed stuff, but I'm a higher ed person. And so like, maybe we could do some higher ed at OET. And so I think he let me come over. And then I just, and I think we decided that there was actually a lot to be done in understanding the role of technology in post-secondary education. And they didn't have a person doing it. And so like, I just made up my job.
That's amazing. And how long have you been in this job now?
It will be I've been in it for like 4.5 years.
Wow. That
no, 4 years.
Yeah.
It is fast.
Although this year feels like 10 years, but
This year, yes, feels like forever.
I know. I'm like, but we could talk about that forever. We won't go there. No, but I love, like, I actually even love how you describe that you just were sort of like, I call what you said stalking. My like PC way to say that is pleasantly persistent.
Okay.
Someone called me that, or like early on in my career when I was basically stalking. And they were like, wow, you're so pleasantly persistent. I was like, that is a wonderful way to say that I'm annoying you. But in all, it's really a way to kind of get an opportunity, right? So I think this is really great because there's something that you wanted to do and you just didn't give up. I find that sort of like persistence to be really fascinating. And I mean, obviously the work now that you're doing here, it all totally paid off. And it's just amazing that you asked, like, can I come sit in your office?
Desperate times.
It happens. And it's great. It's great that you took that opportunity. So,
well, I think though, this is a really interesting point, right? Because I feel like you and I, and then some people that we know are probably in a very small minority of people that have the opportunity to do this, right? So like, I had connections. I knew people, right? These are people that were in my social network already, or my professional social network. And so I could approach them. I can't imagine how to do this if that wasn't true, right? And I feel like there are probably a lot of people that are way smarter than me that could do my job way better than I do, but they just never get a chance because, like, first of all, like they don't. So I felt pressure to get this like detail done because like I was going to be in big trouble if I didn't like hit this requirement, right? And so I had to call around and just be like, I have like 1 week to like state where I'm going.
Right.
What do I do? And so the time pressure, but also like people just don't know that they can do this, right? And this is something that I like to tell people as well is like, if you see something that you want, you should like just pursue it and you should just go after it because everything else, I mean, I am like the most insecure person in the world, but I was forced by circumstances to actually have to get over that and do it. I just think that there are so many people without a social network to support them in doing this, and that don't have the connections, and I don't know how to fix that, right? Obviously, I mean, you guys, this is our universal problem. And so I feel very lucky in the sense that like, yes, I'm probably a stalker or pleasantly persistent. But it actually was successful, not because of anything that I did, I think, but because I am in a circumstance that allows this kind of behavior to be rewarded.
Right. Well, I wonder too, like if I think back to my early days before I had a network, I'm trying to even think back, my parents didn't even have the ability to introduce me to anyone. And not that I was living in any unfortunate circumstances, in the whole scheme of things. I wasn't super well off or anything, but they didn't have the types of jobs that had potential connections for me. I mean, they tried, it just didn't work out. So what I can say for someone that just didn't necessarily have anyone to rely on in those early stages, I just went out there and asked for it. And I was that person, just like you said, like I would, and this is maybe before the time, we can't do this right now, but I would walk into people's offices and I would be like, no, I'll just wait till they're free. And I would wait for like 12 hours.
Yes.
Like I would sit there and they'd be like, well, finally we need to let her in because, and these were like high security offices in New York City. I was like, nope, I'll wait. I want to meet with this CEO. Like, it's fine. But I was nice about it. Like, that is the one thing. I was nice about it. And I always tried to figure out like what I could do to help them and make it valuable, like mutually beneficial. Right. So there were plenty of times that I offered volunteered myself to get in doing something, or worked for free, like whatever it was. So even I do have to say, and again, I realize everyone has a different situation going on, but I would not, the power of that, just being persistent in that way and getting over your fear, because I agree with you. Like I have had plenty of moments of insecurity. I fear is constantly, that was always there. And I was just like, nope, I'm not going to listen, like push that back down. And I'm just going to go for it. And it's the only way to find out. And everyone at some point has to start building it. The stuff you and I do today, these networks that we have now, we did not, didn't happen years ago. I mean, this took time.
Absolutely.
So I love that you said that. Thank you for sharing. So now, we've actually throughout this, I normally filter, I was telling you, I'm going to filter in questions about skills, but we really hit on a lot of skills that have led to sort of success for you. But what I'm interested in is I've heard a lot about what you've learned sort of going through at work in terms of skills. Do you, and obviously we're sitting here today, both being very passionate about education and, what opportunities that can offer you. So I'm curious how you feel in terms of skills. Like, is this a combo between work, life, learning, how you build skills? Park ranging activities?
Park ranging activities. Yeah, I mean, so I plan my park ranging activities on a spreadsheet, just like I plan all of my work projects on a spreadsheet. So I feel like there's some characteristics about like just some personality quirks that are very consistent. Oh, this is so embarrassing. So when I plan like a hiking trip, I have like a multi-tab spreadsheet where I I weigh my gear and I count the number of calories and I weigh the food that I bring. And so it's sort of like I'm all in on this, like have a spreadsheet like thing in my life.
I love it.
So,
no, this is not, everyone has their thing. Like, this is awesome.
So I guess that is my main thing. But I also feel like something that I read a book like a million years ago, and I don't remember loving the book, but I remember one thing out of it, right? Okay. So I read a book a million years ago called So Good They Can't Ignore You, right? And it's like a career development book, but the thing I remember about it is like, I can't remember the name of the author, but I'm sure Google knows.
I'm going to look it up, and when I post this,
yeah. The book. So, I don't know if this is a recommendation or not. So the premise of the book is like pursuing a passion is not the right way to build a career. And so the book, I think, talks about how like people who really love like baking cookies often find that they can't manage a bakery, right? Because there are like a whole set of skills that are involved in like restaurant management that are not baking,
Yes.
right? And so he talks about in the book, like people who are really good at something or have really interesting careers or do interesting things, do it by building expertise in things, right? And then using the expertise that they have to leverage more and more control, right? So I think that's like a good summary of the book. If I get it wrong and the author's mad, whatever. So that's what I got away from it. And the reason I liked it is because it sort of was different to me than like everything else that I had read, which is like find the color of your parachute, or you know, what is your passion? And like the thing is, I'm not like oh, I have a passion for X, Y, and Z, right? I'm very like I guess I like to do things like that are like tangible, right, with my hands. And so like it's hard for me to be like I'm super passionate about like the earth, or you know, it's I don't know, it's like not like that. It's like an athletic event for me that I like train for, like my running, right? And so there are like all these things that like really resonated with me about like versus like pursuing a passion, just like, oh, well, you know, I understand this because I'm Asian, I'm an Asian kid. And so what that means is like, I practiced the violin when I was little, and I like, you know, did my math homework, and like I did extracurricular math homework that was assigned from my parents and not my teachers. And, you know, there was all this, like, you have to like practice, like that was sort of like the drill. And that resonated with me because I'm like, you know, I actually know how to study, and I know how to like learn something because like my parents taught me, you know, all of these things, right? So like, why would that not be true about my job? So I was, you know, all the sort of common thread for me was I did a lot of like data work that was like, cleaning data is so like, I don't know, it's so like boring, and it's like on a spreadsheet and you just click and it's like, it's mundane, but you know, you can get really good at data and then you can understand how it works. And so I'm like, well, you know, when I was in grad school, that was my job. I cleaned data for people, like data sets for people. And then, you know, that happens, right? And then you can get another job where like, you don't maybe clean the data sets, but you maybe get to like be the interpreter of the data. And then like, you know, suddenly you're the regulation writer on the formula, but that's like a whole other thing. But, you know, it's sort of like you can actually leverage like your increased expertise in a specific skill to do more interesting things. So I don't work on data now, but I feel like I understand it. And so when we have a conversation about like, why is it important? Like, what are the necessary components for an interoperable digital credential, and how do you teach people what is linked to open data? I think you and I had a conversation about this. So we have been working a lot in the department about thinking about like, how do we not only give people a credential for the programs that we fund, but make that credential meaningful and help them get a job, right? So we can't control how employers behave, but we know that there is an initially, I think, a language barrier between how the department, like the education folks say, like what people can do when they finish and what employers say they need. And so what if we like enforced the digital credentialing, the interoperability aspect to some of these credentials? But then it's sort of like, it's actually very complex. In theory, it's very simple. You know, you want to have a credential describe what a person that has the credential can do. But then you have like these second order problems, right? So, well, is everyone describing them the same way, right? Or if are you recording the information then in a way that like the format can be received by others, right? These are the huge technical problems that you all work on, that like many other organizations.
It's like the underlying way at the surface level. Like, why isn't it done already?
Yes, like make it a thing. Like I still remember like in 2000, like way back when TACT was first a thing, like people talked about it, right? Better aligning employers and educators and training by using skills-based licensure and credentialing. Like this was a huge talking point. And we desperately wanted to align the education data with the workforce data. It kept being really hard. And it kept being really hard because of underlying data structures being, you know, really difficult because of the technology that was available at the time. There were not as many mature open data standards. There were not people working on platforms that allowed you to like, there were no open APIs.
No, and there were like all the processes around all of that. That was like that in and of itself.
It was manual, and it depended on like me knowing you, and then you convincing your lawyer to sign an agreement with my lawyer that it would be okay for us to share, because this idea of sharing the data across silos was also like from a policy perspective new. So, you know, so like I was like thinking about like what we could talk about, and I was thinking, you know, like some of these, so when you said over 10 years, I think I wrote that talking point for you because it makes me feel really old. But I was thinking like, way back when, these were all just like ideas and little baby projects that
Yeah.
have like grown up a lot
Yeah. I mean,
over the
let's
last few
dive into
years.
that though, too, because there are some really amazing things that you're working on right now. I'm just going
Yeah.
to, like, I know this, we've got the education blockchains, and you've got this new innovation challenge that what was announced today. That was today, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then the new, it was interoperable learning record, now called learning and employment record, that
Hmm.
stuff. And
Yes.
then, of course, like the CARES Act grants have come out, which everyone is really excited about, because of obviously what's happening in this time. And, I can remember back with the TACT grants when we were going through that recovery period,
Yeah.
and how important that was. So I know this time to get people resources that they need is super important, but there's so many wonderful things that you've got going on. Like, I'd love to hear more.
I don't even know where to start. So today we announced the Blockchain Innovation Challenge. And so what we want people to do is use blockchains to think about how to empower individuals. And so why we are interested in blockchains, a couple of reasons, right? So first of all, this isn't us endorsing like Bitcoin, although Bitcoin went pretty high a few weeks ago, and I like was regretting not being more aggressive in my investment. But blockchain technology has some really interesting characteristics, and we've made some videos on the Office of EdTech website about it. But essentially what it does is it allows individuals to have access and control over their data. And aside from like the language barrier that we just talked about, there's a huge problem where if I wanted to transfer schools, or if I'm a student who took classes just at like 3 of the community colleges around me, my next step is even more difficult because I have to find the transcripts, which are the verified records that I know the things that I know. And my next destination, whether it's an employer or another educational institution, they have to decide whether that's good enough, right?
Yeah.
And then, but they don't know. They're making decisions based on the information I provide them, like a syllabus or something like that. But they don't
Right.
know, but they're not asking me what my skills are. They're asking the syllabus, like what was like what I
Right.
read. Um, and it's an imperfect process. And if I worked a little bit, I might be able to do a prior learning assessment.
Right.
Or if I had like some sort of apprenticeship that might be recorded. But all of the things that I know, it's very difficult to record them and have access to them in one place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that this is a really interesting, like, could there be a technology infrastructure that's very different, that instead of preserving all of the data in individual silos that you query every single time at some cost, could it be that an individual always has access to their set of data that describes them, and could they be the arbiters of who gets access next? So
I
people
love it.
query them.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that we're really interested in. And when we published, we worked with the American Council on Education, and they published a report in June. It was really interesting, some of the observations about how blockchain has been used
Mm-hmm.
specifically for that. And it was mostly an acknowledgement that the education and employment ecosystem is very complex, and it's based on strong networks of relationships, because institutions exist in silos. And I think that I don't want people to misunderstand. I actually think silos are good. They protect you. There
Mm-hmm.
are some privacy considerations, and you don't want your data just out in the universe. We know what happens when that kind of stuff goes down.
Yeah.
So you want there to be protection, and you want accountability, most importantly, right? So if something happens bad to your data and it's leaked, you want someone to have to answer for that. And that's why we sometimes have these structures, right?
Yeah.
But but when we want to actually put a person at the center, we have to figure out how to break down those silos or make them a little bit like responsibly porous, right? So
Mm-hmm.
preserve privacy, protect the individual, but give them full access so that they feel like they have control over their next step. And
Yeah.
a lot of the the blockchain projects were that they supported a different kind of ecosystem, a way of actually exchanging that data while preserving the individual's sort of agency at the center.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what we want people to explore. So we want people to think about, what is the ecosystem problem, right? And how do we solve it for the person that's traditionally not well served? So if, MIT obviously was the first. They were like, hey, we have our diplomas on a blockchain. And you're like, congratulations, because an engineer from MIT wouldn't get a job otherwise, right? So
Right.
it's,
Right.
but you need someone to go first to test out the technology. And
Yeah.
I love the people that work on it. This is me making fun of them. But what about like the working mom, right? Like, how is
Right.
she gonna like figure out how to like navigate her new blockchain wallet? Or even the 30 million adults who are not digitally literate, what are they gonna do, right?
Exactly.
Like, the whole point of connecting skills and education is that we want to provide economic opportunity for those people. And especially now, there's something like 40 million newly unemployed Americans, and it's crazy. So how do we get them rapidly retrained, or how do we help them communicate the skills that they do have so that they can find another opportunity? So we're hoping people will demonstrate how they will support the ecosystem to provide mobility, especially for underserved populations. And we do also want to, again, enforce the interoperability. So we have published a short white paper on education blockchain interoperability of the standards that we hope people will use, so that across the projects, we can see some interoperability of records.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that when I post this podcast, I'll include all of that and how to actually apply for the challenge and everything like that, because it's a great opportunity. I think more people, hopefully a lot of people will share it along with this.
Yeah. So that's like one of the main projects, but it has the interoperability element, which is a lot of what, the other projects are, which again, there has been so much progress over the last few years in this area. It's just been amazing.
Yeah.
I think without getting super nerdy, like people using, like ACRO adopting the CLR standard, or the W3C verifiable credentials becoming like mature in that version that like people generally use, or just even the work that groups like T3 that you guys are doing, putting like skills, making them open. There's I think enough momentum for us to start tying these all together comprehensively. So we tried to do that a little bit by making it a requirement for the Reimagining Workforce grants in the CARES Act.
Yeah.
It's been interesting. I think that you probably do this way better and more than I do, but explain to people who had not previously been introduced to to this world of interoperability and data models, like helping people understand like how to implement this or how to do this, and trying to make them, I guess, assured that this isn't something that's that they're not capable of doing, because it seems very technically difficult, because we're using words like data models, which like to people that don't listen to this podcast know what that means. Like, I don't know, right?
No, I mean, it can be overwhelming for some, but in all honesty, it makes life for your students and the purpose, right? The purpose, your students' success being a job, or I would hope so. Not only completion, but it makes it so much better for them, and honestly, it seems like it's a lot, but it's not actually as complex as one would think. So have you been getting a lot of questions about that?
I think we got a lot of "what is this" questions. And so we have been working on how to help people sort of introduce people into it slowly. I think the thing that is difficult to communicate to people that are your grantees or your stakeholders is like, this is different than how we've traditionally done things, but it's also not, right? Because you've always issued some kind of credential that says this person has done a course.
Right.
This is just representing that information in a different way. And it is maybe like a new technical process that might cost something, but this is why we have federal grants, right? To help you over that initial hump. And this is why we have technical assistance resources. We have staff that can help you, or we can have staff that points to other people that can help you.
Exactly. So, and I know you guys hosted a webinar, right? Just describing the CARES Act grants. I'll have to make sure that I get the link from you so that I can put that in when I post this as well, just for anyone that didn't get a chance to catch it or still has questions. And of course, if there are more questions around the interoperable piece of it, we can always figure out who, if it's you or other people that might be able to kind of put together like a little webinar for anyone that needs some help.
But it's really exciting. And the other sort of related work that some of us are part of is the Learning and Employment Records Project. Is that the right the acronym?
Yes, it's the new one. I know. It's so hard to keep up with the name changes and the acronyms.
There are projects that other people, not myself. So I have the pleasure of telling you about other people's work, and it is really fun because on one hand, it's like really exciting what other people are doing, but on the other hand, I feel like, oh, I'm kind of lazy. I just don't actually do any of these projects myself. But
oh my gosh, stop! You're like the busiest person I know.
So there are some pilot projects, and the working group is working on, I think, another paper that will sort of show the progress of these projects, which they're really exciting projects. They're partnerships between groups that are part of the Workforce Policy Advisory Board. So the Workdays, the Salesforces, IBMs, WGU, a number of other organizations as well. I think you guys are maybe part of one of the projects too.
We are, yeah.
And it'll be just interesting because you do want to tie together the ecosystem, which is the point, right? So, you know, educational institutions can describe their credentials differently, but if employers in their applicant tracking systems or in their hiring information systems can't ingest the information or commit to, because it's a business process change for them as well.
It completely is. I was just actually on the phone with the group that's doing the Community College Growth Fund, and we were literally this morning just having the same discussion, because we were like, but if the employers are not willing to hire these people, that's like the whole purpose. And how do we do that?
Yes. And so one of the exciting things too is we're starting to collaborate more, or we have another point of collaboration with our colleagues at the Department of Labor when they do their workforce and employment training grants. They're also starting to include them, this requirement for digital interoperable credentials. And we're starting to think about how we can sort of, as a whole federal government, have a concerted effort to communicate the importance of this and to invest in it.
Yeah, and I feel like now, I'm sure you agree, it's just so interesting. It's like, now's the time. We keep talking about, and I mean, we joke that this time is so hard and all of that, but in all honesty, it's such a great opportunity. You know, we look back to, you know, we've both been a part of the last economic crisis, the fallout in 2008 and the recovery of that. And if we look back at sort of like the impact that happened, and again, it felt not, you know, while you were in it, you didn't necessarily feel how fast things were moving. But now when we look back, I mean, that was such a short period of time and such a burst. And we have that opportunity now to really jump ahead so much further than we would have if we weren't presented with this challenge.
I think that's true, because I remember like way back when people were like, are you sure you want to force people, are you sure you want to target investment to like more online modules, like online career and technical training? That's like new. Or like, I remember the first, I think it was a Lumina funded report on like the CBE landscape when there were like under like 100 CBE programs. And people were all a little skeptical about like, you know, it's a great idea. Can it actually work in reality? Can people get accredited for it? And then there was simultaneously investments. There were Department of Ed, I guess, experimental sites where the regulatory flexibilities were extended. And, you know, suddenly we have CBE programs and people understand what a competency is now, I think.
Exactly. I mean, I think we all hope, right? But it's come so far. And I feel like this is just one of those moments where we're going to look back in a few years and see, wow, this was just like rapid advancement, and it felt uncomfortable at first, but here we are. At least that's my hope.
We will get through this. I think we will get through this. We definitely will. The human race is very resilient.
Yes, I completely agree. Well, Sharon, we're coming up on the end of our time here, and I always like to ask this open-ended question, which you can answer any which way that you like, but is there some last parting words you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, I should have prepared better for this. So I guess I will make an offer on behalf of the Department of Education. So I feel like you're going to also post my contact information. I feel like we're always, as a team, trying to figure out how we can best understand the needs of our stakeholders and how to serve the people that we are meant to better. So please reach out to me if you have questions about any of the things that I said that are, I think, marginally work related. I can't, like, if you want to hire me and you work for the National Park Service, I'm available. I was going to say, if you want to hire the park ranger, she obviously wants to hear from you. I do absolutely want to hear from you. Right. If you want to build a credentialing platform,
that these badges,
right, they mean something
for this job.
But tell us how we can support the work that you all are doing in skills and credentialing better, whether it's, you know, programs you didn't understand our requirements you think we should have, or if you just want to tell us about some of the projects that you're working on that are just really great that you think we can help you amplify, then let us know. So definitely just everyone reach out to me. Now
That's
that
so,
I know that I'm supposed to be approachable, right?
yes, exactly. And she is 100% approachable. I can guarantee that. No, thank you so much for that offer, Sharon. I know there will be plenty of people that take you up on that. So for you guys that are looking to reach out to Sharon, I'll post this all in there, but she is also available on LinkedIn at Sharon Leu, that's L-E-U, and on Twitter at the Sharon Leu, which by the way, I just completely love that handle. I was like, maybe I need to change mine, the. I love it. But you guys, thank you so much for listening in to this episode of Let's Talk About Skills, Baby. If you enjoyed the podcast, please jump on one of the platforms that it's available on, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, subscribe, leave some feedback, leave a rating. I would really appreciate it. And if you want to follow me, I am available on all of the socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Kelly Ryan Bailey. Thank you all again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.